Hey all, welcome to your lesson on psychopersonality and psychoanalytic theories of personality. So we're going to start off with what is personality. It's an individual's characteristic pattern of thinking, feeling, and acting. Our personality drives what we laugh at, whom we hang with, how we occupy our time, why we cry, and where we choose to live. Our personality underlies all that makes us us. What theories inform our understanding of personality? So we've got psychoanalytic or psychodynamic theories propose that childhood sexuality and unconscious motivations influence personality. Trait theories examine characteristic patterns of behavior or traits. And humanistic theories focus on our inner capacities for growth and self-fulfillment. And social cognitive theories explore the interaction between people's traits, including their thinking and their social context. What are the psychodynamic theories? So we're going to go over each of those. So we're going to get into Freud. Psychodynamic theories of personality view human personality as a dynamic interaction between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind, including associated motives and conflicts. How are psychodynamic theories related to psychoanalysis? So psychodynamic theories are descended from Sigmund Freud's psychoanalysis and his theory that proposed childhood sexuality and unconscious motivations influence our personality. And this is all stuff from Unit 1 as well that we reviewed in the beginning of the How did Sigmund Freud's treatment of psychological disorders lead to his view of the unconscious mind? So in treating patients whose disorders had no clear physical explanation, Freud concluded that these problems reflected unacceptable thoughts and feelings hidden away in the unconscious mind. For instance, Freud speculated that lost feeling in one's hand might be caused by a fear of touching one's genitals. That unexplained blindness or deafness might be caused by not wanting to see or hear something that aroused intense anxiety. So what is the unconscious? Well, according to Freud, the unconscious is a reservoir of mostly unacceptable thoughts, wishes, feelings, and memories. How did Freud explore the unconscious? So to explore it, the hidden part of a patient's mind, Freud used free association and dream analysis. In psychoanalysis, free association is a method of exploring the unconscious in which the person relaxes and says whatever comes to mind, no matter how trivial or embarrassing. How is Freud's view of the mind depicted? So, psychologists have used an iceberg image to illustrate Freud's idea that the mind is mostly hidden beneath the conscious surface. And we're going to go over each of these in this lesson, but the ego is the top part of the iceberg. Mostly conscious makes peace between the id and the superego. So underneath, the darker blue, we have the preconscious. This is the outside awareness, but accessible. And then we have superego, internalized ideals, and then the id, which is your unconscious energy, your unconscious mind. So how did Freud view the mind? Basic to Freud's theory was his belief that our mind is mostly hidden. Our conscious awareness is like the part of an iceberg that floats above the surface. Beneath this awareness is the larger unconscious mind with its thoughts, wishes, feelings, and memories. What did Freud believe about the unconscious? So of greater interest to Freud was the mass of unacceptable passions and thoughts that he believed we repress or forcibly block from our consciousness because they would be too unsettling to acknowledge. Freud believed that without our awareness, these unconscious, troublesome feelings and ideas powerfully influence us, sometimes gaining expression in disguised forms. The work we choose, the beliefs we hold, our daily habits, are upsetting symptoms. What was Freud's belief about human personality? Freud believed that human personality, including its emotions and desires, arises from a conflict between impulse and restraint, between our aggressive pleasure-seeking biological urges and our internalized social controls over these urges. Freud believed personality arises from our efforts to resolve this basic conflict, to express these impulses in ways that bring satisfaction without also bringing guilt or punishment. So Freud's proposition, to understand the mind's dynamics during this conflict, Freud proposed three interacting systems: the id, the ego, and the superego. So the id is a reservoir of unconscious psychic energy that, according to Freud, strives to satisfy basic sexual and aggressive drives. The id operates on the pleasure principle, demanding immediate gratification. The ego is the largely conscious executive part of personality that, according to Freud, mediates among the demands of the id, superego, and reality. The ego operates on the reality principle, satisfying the id's desires and the superego's restraints in ways that will realistically bring pleasure rather than pain. The superego is the part of personality that, according to Freud, represents internalized ideals and provides standards for judgment, the conscious, and future aspirations. So what's the role of the ego? Because the superego's demands often oppose the id's, the ego struggles to reconcile the two. The ego is the personality executive, mediating among the impulse demands of the id, the restraining demands of the superego, and the real-life demands of the external world. So in this cartoon, we have somebody getting money out of an ATM machine. 50 is plenty, 150. The ego struggles to reconcile the demands of the superego and id, said Freud. What developmental stages did Freud propose? So Freud believed that children pass through a series of psychosexual stages during which the id's pleasure-seeking energies focus on distinct pleasure-sensitive areas of the body called erogenous zones. So we've got stages of life on the left and what the focus is on the right. So on the left, from 0 to 18 months, we have oral. Pleasure centers on the mouth. So that's when babies are like constantly sticking things in their mouth and sucking, biting, chewing on things. Their teeth are coming in. 18 to 36 months, we have anal, which is pleasure, focuses on bowel and bladder elimination and coping with demands for control. So that's when the period that of childhood, 18 to 36 months, some babies will actually become potty trained within that time. Phallic is 3 to 6 years. So pleasure zone is the genitals, coping with incestuous sexual feelings. Latency, 6 to puberty, a phase of dormant sexual feelings. And then genital puberty on maturation of sexual interests. What is the Oedipus complex? Freud believed that during the phallic stage, for example, boys develop both unconscious sexual desires for their mother and jealousy and hatred for their father when they consider a rival. These feelings, he thought, led boys to feel guilty and to fear punishment, perhaps by castration from their father. He called this collection of feelings the Oedipus complex after the Greek legend of Oedipus, who unknowingly killed his father and married his mother. How did Freud believe the child reduced the threat of the Oedipus complex? Freud believed children eventually cope with the threatening feelings of the Oedipus complex by repressing them and by identifying with, trying to become like, the rival parent. Through this identification process, children's superegos gain strength as they incorporate many of their parents' values. What is the Electra complex? Some psychoanalysts in Freud's era believed that girls experience a parallel Electra complex named after a mythological plotting daughter. As with the Oedipus complex, young girls in the phallic stage would seek to identify with their mother or stepmother in hopes of diffusing the unconscious tension. Forming identity. So, Freud believed that identification with the same-sex parent provided what psychologists now call our gender identity, our sense of being male, female, or some combination of the two. And we used this slide or that picture in our sexual orientation and gender identity lesson back in Unit 6 as well. What is fixation? So in psychoanalytic theory, according to Freud, a lingering focus of pleasure-seeking energies at an earlier psychosexual stage in which conflicts were unresolved. In Freud's view, conflicts unresolved during earlier psychosexual stages could surface as maladaptive behavior in the adult years. At any point in the oral, anal, or phallic stages, strong conflict could lock or fixate the person's pleasure-seeking energies in that stage. What's an example? So, a person who had been either orally overindulged or deprived, perhaps by abrupt early weaning, might fixate at the oral stage. And by early weaning, I'm talking about maybe from early weaning on breastfeeding or like a pacifier or something like that. The orally fixated adult could exhibit either passive dependence, like that of a nursing infant, or exaggerated denial of this dependence by acting tough or uttering biting sarcasm. Or the person might continue to seek oral gratification by smoking or excessive eating. So it's how that plays out later in life. How did Freud believe people defended themselves against anxiety? So Freud proposed that the ego protects itself with defense mechanisms. These are tactics that reduce or redirect anxiety by distorting reality. So we've got regression, reaction formation, projection, rationalization, displacement, sublimation, and denial. AP exam tip. The differences between these defense mechanisms are not always clear. For example, repression can be found in most examples. Focused on each example's key feature. If the key feature is seeing your own impulse in someone else, it's projection. If the key feature is shifting your aggression from one target to another, it's displacement. So in psychoanalytic theory, defense mechanisms are the ego's protective methods of reducing anxiety by unconsciously distorting reality. For Freud, all defense mechanisms function indirectly and unconsciously. Just as the body unconsciously defends itself against disease, so also does the ego unconsciously defend itself against anxiety. What is repression? So in psychoanalytic theory, the basic defense mechanism that banishes from consciousness anxiety-arousing thoughts, feelings, and memories. For example, according to Freud, repression underlies all the other defense mechanisms. However, because repression is often incomplete, repressed urges may appear as symbols in dreams or as slips of the tongue in casual conversation. And this leads us to what you've probably all heard of is Freudian slips. Freud believed he could glimpse the unconscious seeping through what we today call Freudian slips. Freud also viewed jokes as expressions of repressed sexual and aggressive tendencies. Good morning, beheaded. Beloved. That is an example of a Freudian slip. What did Freud believe about dreams? So Freud viewed dreams as the royal road to the unconscious. The remembered content of dreams, the manifest content, he believed to be a censored expression of the dreamer's unconscious wishes, the dream's latent content. In his dream analysis, Freud searched for patients' inner conflicts. Who were the Neo-Freudians? So these pioneering psychoanalysts, referred to as the Neo-Freudians, adopted Freud's interviewing techniques and accepted his basic ideas. The personality structures of id, ego, and superego, the importance of the unconscious, the childhood roots of personality, and the dynamics of anxiety and the defense mechanisms, which, by the way, we will go into detail about defense mechanisms in our work on this section. Who is Alfred Adler? So Adler, who gave us the still popular inferiority complex idea, had struggled to overcome childhood illnesses and accidents. He believed that much of our behavior is driven by efforts to conquer childhood inferiority feelings that trigger our strivings for superiority and power. Karen Horney. Horney said childhood anxiety triggers our desire for love and security. She also opposed Freud's assumptions that women have weak superegos and suffer penis envy, and she attempted to balance his masculine bias. Carl Jung. Jung believed the unconscious contains more than our repressed thoughts and feelings. He believed we also have a collective unconscious, a common reservoir of images or archetypes derived from our species' universal experiences. What are examples of archetypes? The hero and the rebel, the caregiver and the innocent are among the 12 archetypes Jung believed reside within the collective unconscious of humans. Jung thought these 12 archetypes generate deep emotions and dominate the personality. The collective unconscious explains why, for many people, according to Jung, spiritual concerns are deeply rooted and why people in different cultures share certain myths, such as the flood myth and images. Most of today's psychologists discount the idea of inherited experiences, but they do believe that our shared evolutionary history shaped some universal dispositions and that experience can leave epigenetic marks affecting gene expression. What is a projective test? A personality test that provides ambiguous images designed to trigger projection of one's inner dynamics. A psychologist working in the Freudian tradition would require a personality test that could provide some sort of road into the unconscious, unearth the residue of early childhood experiences, move beneath surface thoughts, reveal hidden conflicts and impulses. Objective assessment tools such as agree, disagree, true, false questionnaires would be inadequate because they would merely tap the conscious surface. What is the thematic apperception test, the TAT? This is a projective test which people express inner feelings and interests through stories they make up about ambiguous scenes. How does the TAT test work? So, shown a daydreaming boy, those who image he is fantasizing about an achievement are presumed to be projecting their own goals. As a rule, said Henry Murray, developer of the TAT, the subject leaves the test happily unaware that he has presented the psychologist with what amounts to an X-ray of his inner self. Numerous studies suggest that Murray was right. The TAT provides a valid and reliable map of people's implicit motives. What is the Rorschach inkblot test? This is the most widely used projective test. It's a set of 10 inkblots designed by Hermann Rorschach, which seeks to identify people's inner feelings by analyzing their interpretations of the blots. And we're going to actually make our own blots in class. I'm really excited. How does this test work? Well, people tell what they see in a series of symmetrical ink blots. Some who use this test are confident that the interpretation of ambiguous images will reveal unconscious aspects of the test taker's personality. Some clinicians cherish this test, even offering Rorschach-based assessments of criminals' violence potential. Others view the test as a source of suggestive leads, an icebreaker, or a revealing interview technique. How is it criticized? Critics argue that only a few of the many Rorschach-derived scores, such as those for cognitive impairment and thought disorder, have demonstrated reliability and validity. Inkblot assessments have inaccurately diagnosed many healthy adults as pathological. Even seasoned professionals can be fooled by their intuitions and their faith in tools that lack strong evidence of effectiveness. How do contemporary psychologists view Freud's psychoanalysis? So both Freud's devotees and his detractors agree that recent research contradicts many of his specific ideas. Today's developmental psychologists see our development as lifelong, not fixed in childhood. They doubt that infants' neural networks are mature enough to sustain as much emotional trauma as Freud assumed. Some think Freud overestimated parental influence and underestimated peer influence. How do his theories fall short? So psychologists further criticized Freud's theory for its scientific shortcomings. Recall from Module 5 that good scientific theories explain observations and offer testable hypotheses. And this is from Module 5 was from Unit 1. Freud's theory rests on few objective observations, and parts of it offer few testable hypotheses. For Freud, his own recollections and interpretations of patients' free associations, dreams, and slips, sometimes selected to support his theory, were evidence enough. What's the most serious problem with Freud's theory? Well, it offers after-the-fact explanations of any characteristic of one person smoking, another's fear of horses, another's sexual orientation, yet fails to predict why such behaviors and traits occur, or to actually predict such behaviors and traits. A good theory makes testable predictions. For example, if you feel angry at your mom's death, you illustrate Freud's theory because your unresolved childhood dependency needs are threatened. If you do not feel angry, you again illustrate his theory because you are repressing your anger. How would his supporters respond? Freud's supporters object to the criticism. To criticize Freudian theory for not making testable predictions is, they say, like criticizing baseball for not being an aerobic exercise, something it was never intended to be. Freud never claimed that psychoanalysis was predictive science. He merely claimed that looking back, psychoanalysts could find meaning in our state of mind. How has his idea of reaction formation been supported in the research? So one study demonstrated the defense mechanism, reaction formation, trading unacceptable impulses for their opposite in men who reported strong anti-gay attitudes. Compared with those who did not report such attitudes, these anti-gay men experienced greater arousal when watching videos of homosexual men having sex. Likewise, some evidence suggests that people who unconsciously identify as homosexual, but who consciously identify as straight, report more negative attitudes towards gays. How might Freud's theories have been correct? So research has supported Freud's idea that we unconsciously defend ourselves against anxiety. Researchers have proposed that one source of anxiety is the terror resulting from our awareness of vulnerability and death. Nearly 300 experiments testing terror management theory show that thinking about one's mortality, for example, by writing a short essay on dying and its associated emotions, provokes various terror management defenses. What are those? These are death anxiety increases terror management defenses such as aggression towards rivals and esteem for oneself. Faced with a threatening world, people act not only to enhance their self-esteem, but also to adhere more strongly to worldviews that answer questions about life's meaning. Terror management theory is a theory of death-related anxiety, which explores people's emotional and behavioral responses to reminders of their impending death. Oh, look, my fortune cookie. It says, "Someday you will die." Was Freud right about the unconscious? Well, Freud was right about a big idea that underlies today's psychodynamic thinking. We have limited access to all that goes on in our mind. Our two-track mind has a vast out-of-sight realm. Some researchers even argue that most of a person's everyday life is determined by unconscious thought processes.